people's lives. Conscience is for everybody really, but especially those of us who seem to have a final say. That if I say it's left, it's going to be left. If I say it's right, it's going to be right. Do I make my decisions based on conscience? When Jesus Christ was being crucified, it was an interesting thing. Apart from the spiritual part of what God had planned for my salvation and your salvation, the scriptures tell us that no two witnesses said the same thing. Before he was crucified, it was the tradition of the country then. The governor would release somebody for the feast, just like what's called a prerogative of mercy in our times. And at Jesus' time, it was either going to be Jesus or a very terrible criminal called Barabbas. And when he's depicted in the movies, you can really see that the guy was bad. But then there were people going into the crowds saying that when the governor asks who is to be released, say Barabbas. And you see them in the movies going, in the Bible it says that they spoke to the people. So by the time the governor came and said, well, you know, it's my tradition to release one person, who would you ask me to release? This Jesus who has done nothing, or Barabbas the criminal? This is somebody who had stolen from them, harmed them and hurt them, but because of mob action, mass mentality, mass psychology, they all shouted, give us Barabbas, give us Barabbas. And the governor said, but this man is innocent. And they said, no, crucify him, crucify him. And they said, he said to them, well, I'm going to wash my hands of this innocent man's blood. I don't want anything to happen to me. They responded, let his blood be upon us, and let his blood be upon our children. The decisions we make, are we guided by our conscience? When it's time to pay a bonus, when it's time to promote somebody, when we are marking exam scripts and somebody had 51% or 55, but you remember that it's a girl you had asked to come to your house as a lecturer and she refused, or for some reason you wanted something, are you dropping her to 48 so that because of your own inordinate immoral desires she must fail? What about people who are due for scholarships? Are you cutting the scholarship just above somebody's name because you quarreled with the mother or the father sometime in life, or you don't agree with maybe their religious view or their political position or their principles? What about when 3 names are brought for the job and you can clearly see that this one name is the best amongst? What about when the interview was done, written and verbal, and it is clear to everybody that this lady, this man, this company must win the contract? Do we award those contracts based on conscience? Would you give that job based on conscience? Or had you promised somebody that the brown envelope must come to your house, go into your local account, go into your foreign account? The car you drive, is it yours? The scholarships your children have, are they yours? The house you live in, did you buy it, acquire it legally, ethically? Does your conscience excuse you or accuse you? Because imperial authority, we all know. We all say, as for God, God. That's why when people get upset, they said, I leave it with God, or I leave you in the hands of God. But then there's authority of truth. I've always said that I find it intriguing in the legal world that when people affirm or swear on the religious books, they say something to the effect that they swear that the evidence that they're going to give will be the truth, the whole truth, the only truth, and nothing but the truth, and so help them God. But they lie thereafter, you know, and the case itself goes for 15 years. In my simple view, I think if everybody speaks the truth, there's always one truth. It's truth. But then there's conscience. There's conscience. When you botched a decision in medical practice, you botched a decision in law or in any of our jobs and our vocations, and you know that the consequences will be hard, do we cover it? Do we cover ourselves? Do the boys' fraternity, do the girls' fraternity, do the Kumba Banjul, Samba Banjul, do the old boys association, promote each other's children? Does our conscience excuse us, or does our conscience accuse us? You know, in the early days, immediately after Jesus Christ died, a few days, there was a couple. The couple died for no reason, for really no reason, except that they lied. What happened was that as the disciples, the believers of Jesus Christ, as the church was beginning to grow, they were all together, they were sharing. It was such a great community. What I didn't have, somebody brought. Everybody was sharing. And one of the ways they were sharing was people were selling properties at will. They were not under compulsion. They were not being cajoled. Nobody was telling them, threatening them, cursing them. Nobody was crying. There was no emotional blackmail. There was no auto-suggestion. There was no psychological. There was nothing. There was no hypnosis. People were just saying, well, look, I have 3 properties. Let me sell one and give to the community. And there was this couple. The husband was called Ananias. The wife was called Sapphira or Sapphira. And they decided on their own to sell a property they had. And they knew how much they sold it for, maybe 4.5 million. Only God knows whether they declared well, because most people under-declare so they can pay less capital gains tax to the government. That's another discussion altogether. People under-declare with salaries and everything so that we would, dohal it, like we say in the Gambia. And then the husband decided to go with a portion of the money to the apostles, Peter, James, and John, to the early apostles. And he came and he said, we have sold our property, my wife and I, and this is the proceeds. And immediately the Spirit of God witnessed in Peter, the apostle's heart, that he was lying. And Peter said to him, but why are you doing this? Before you sold the property, it was yours. When you decided to sell it, it was still yours. You put a price on it and you sold it. Why to go through this bother and come and lie? You say, well, how did Peter know? Yes, it is possible that sometimes God would reveal these things. Sometimes it's just people whose mouths, in African English we say they leak. People who have what we call okra mouth. They just talk inadvertently and they become the last piece of the jigsaw to the story you were always waiting to put it all together. They just talk inadvertently. Sometimes it could be children that say something. Sometimes it's the documents. It's the seller. It's the buyer. It's the person that did the conveyance. All kinds of things can happen. And so, because he had lied, the apostle spoke to him and that God was going to judge him, and he fell instantly and died. I think more out of his own condemnation, the condemnation of his heart. Then his wife waited for, obviously for a few hours, not seeing the husband. She also came in typical wife type, greeted the people, I'm sure in the African way, greeted and asked for all the relatives and all the relatives, like we do Njai, Wanaka Waker, Njai, Nakasapapa Njai, all that thing that she does. And then Apostle Peter asked her before she even started, tell me, madam, did you sell your property for this much? It's in the book of Acts chapter 4 of the Bible, I think, or chapter 5, sorry, Acts chapter 5. That's the 5th book, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, ACTS, chapter 5. Make time to read it because it's important for us all. In the New Testament, the 5th book, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those are the 4 Gospels, the Injil. Then the 5th book is Acts, the 5th chapter, I believe it is. So Apostle Peter asked her, Madam, did you really sell your plot? She said, oh, yes, yes. Because, whenever people decide to, when they collude and decide to lie, they tend to stand together, sometimes to their death, to their destruction, to some senseless conclusion. Whereas truth could have just released us. I think some people have this phrase that says, speak the truth and put the devil to shame. Just tell the truth. And so when she said yes, then the man said, but why are you people doing this? Why has Satan put it in your heart to lie? And then he made a statement. He said, behold, the feet of those who took your husband to bury him are coming to also take you. She also fell